Good morning and welcome everyone to the Property Subcommittee of Perth and Kinross Council on Monday the 28th of February. For those of you who are listening in, also we welcome you to this meeting. I'd like to start. I believe that we don't have any apologies, but if there are, please speak now or substitutes. I don't see anything coming up, so I will move on. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items before us this morning?
No.
Thank you. We then move on to the meeting of the Property Subcommittee on the 5th and 6th of January. Is everybody content that that's a reflection of the meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Convener, will I just do the roll call now?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Obviously we have Councillor Lyle. For the others, if you could just confirm your attendance. Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Lang.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McEwen. Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Yes.
Present.
Councillor Shires. Present. And Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. We now move on to the substantive item of business this morning, which is the proposed disposal of numbers 1 to 5 Cumberland Barracks, Cooper Angus. And could we have someone introduce the paper, please?
Thank you. I'll leave it to you. I'll introduce the. Yep, thank you. This paper refers to the disposal of Cumberland Barracks, which contains 6 council flats, which, along with an amendment, was approved by the Housing and Communities Committee on the 24th of January. The report is now seeking approval from the Property Subcommittee to also approve the disposal. At the Housing and Communities Committee on the 24th of January, various questions were raised by members on the decision to seek disposal, and to ensure that Property Subcommittee has this information, there is an addendum to the report. Cumberland Barracks is a Category B listed building built between 1745 and 1766. The building is a 3-storey L-plan rubble construction and white sandstone dressings. Contained within the building are 6 flats, 1 bedsit and 5 one-bedroom properties, all of which are currently empty due to significant challenges in identifying suitable tenants due to the small size and dark interior of the properties. Repairs, improvements and maintenance to the building are also challenging and costly due to its listed status. Despite a range of measures to encourage take-up of the properties, some have been empty since April 2020, resulting in loss of rental income to the service while still having to pay to maintain the fabric and security of the building. An assessment carried out by the District Valuer in August 2021 has indicated a value of around £256,000 for the building with the 6 properties. Through our consultation and engagement framework, tenants were fully consulted in early December 2021 and no concerns were raised regarding this proposal. The decision to dispose of these properties has not been taken lightly given the pressure for social housing in Perth and Kinross, but given the lack of demand, high refusals and the significant ongoing cost to maintain the building, disposing of the properties is considered to be the right decision as it will enable monies to be reinvested into our new build or regeneration programme, therefore providing homes that applicants and tenants want and will prevent any further financial loss to the housing service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions at this point? And just to remind members that it has been through the Housing Committee previously and been approved for disposal, and today the recommendation is that we are asked to do that disposal by auction. Do we have any questions?
Okay.
We have Councillor Lane, thank you, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. And yes, I was on the Housing Committee, as were a couple of others on that day, so we know that there was a lot of questions before this was put through, and we were told that the decision there would have no impact on the decision of this committee. That was given as by officers on the day. So first question is, and I have quite a few, Michelle, so if you can bear with me, is I asked the question about, and I don't see it in the addendum, about, you say you asked tenants and it came back there's no questions, but these tenants are current tenants in Cooper Angus area, probably in 2 or 3 bedroom accommodation, and you weren't asking the people who may be seeking single bedroom accommodation. So you were asking people who are in a larger flat if they were concerned that smaller flats would be sold. So I was just wondering about the veracity of that, you know, the substantial claim that tenants were not concerned. It wasn't people who were on the list, it was people who are actually tenants. It was the answer I got at the previous meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. In terms of the disposal framework and strategy, I think we discussed at Housing and Communities Committee that the statutory requirement is for the council to consult with tenants only, because the property is a housing revenue account asset. But we are going to look at the disposal framework moving forward. That was agreed with our tenants, and that's a piece of work we'll look at in terms of whether or not we want to extend that to the wider applicant list.
Okay, thanks. So you would agree that the likelihood of somebody in a 2 or 3 bedroomed accommodation in Cooper Angus would probably be unlikely to show concern about 1 bedroom properties being disposed of?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, yeah, that is correct. But what to bear in mind as well is that most of the applicants, in fact nearly all of the applicants who are on the waiting list for Cooper Angus, have previously been offered these properties and all have been refused.
Yes, and was that before or after the £127,000 of council money was spent on the building? And on that is, why do we keep putting the pictures of the prior? We didn't even have the up-to-date photographs when you came to Housing and Communities. You only showed pictures from before, which I found really strange. If I was selling a car, I wouldn't take a picture of what it looked like 2 years ago before it was painted up and had new tyres on it. I would take pictures at its current state. So can you explain to me why and again you have these pictures from I don't know how long ago before the council money was spent on upgrading the outside of the building?
So in relation to your first question, which was around when were the properties offered out, they were offered out after we'd spent the 127,000. In terms of the photographs, Elaine, I don't know whether you or Nicola want to come in here in terms of the photographs.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, as explained at Housing Communities Committee. It was just the committee cycle. The scaffolding didn't come down until the middle of January, and the committee wasn't till the end. And the pictures that we managed to get in were received at the weekend, so it was a timing issue. There was nothing malice in it at all. It was just that the works had just finished, and that's the reason that there was a time delay in that.
But the question, the pictures were sent in by members of the public and elected members. They weren't by officers going out and taking these pictures, were they?
Yeah, they were sent in on the weekend. So the committee meeting was held on the Monday, and they were sent in on the weekend. So yes, it was sent in by a councillor on the weekend. When the meeting was held on the Monday, we received them on the weekend. So it was a timing issue. We didn't have members of staff available at the weekend to go out and take the pictures. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, we did have an elected member who was able to take the pictures and submit them, and we were able to circulate them to members prior to the committee on the Monday morning.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any further questions at this junction, Councillor Lane, or will I let one of the other councillors?
I've got plenty more questions, but we'll let others obviously have their turn. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. My question, having read the report, and it's a well put together report, so thank you for that, was what is it that about this building that means that the private sector will be able to convert it for high quality accommodation better than we as a local authority can, because usually we have a more ready supply of both tenants as well as equipment and things like that, and more experience of providing affordable housing than the private sector has. So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Michelle wants to take that one. I think I did read something in the papers about access to grant funding in the private sector that we are unable to access. Councillor Bailey,
Yes,
but I'll leave that for Michelle.
Yeah, that is correct in terms of the ability to access additional funding to help support the development and the ongoing maintenance of the building. That sits better, you know, and they have more access within the private sector.
Okay.
Can I also add to that
Claire,
as well? Sorry, can
Claire,
I also add to that? Yes.
Okay.
That's a really good point raised by Councillor Bailey, but we've got different legislation and different obligations as a social landlord and a private landlord. So in terms of a private landlord, they've got a wee bit more flexibility in terms of being able to offer flat sharing, different types of rental charge and flexibility in tenancy duration, unlike a social landlord. And so there's a bit of difference in terms of tenancy obligations, which provides a bit more flexibility to the private sector and what it does to a social landlord.
Okay, can I ask Claire if she wants to supplement that answer?
No, I think Elaine has articulated the point that I was making, and I was going to make in terms of the types of lease and the arrangements with private tenants and private landlords, that we've got different obligations, as Elaine described there, in terms of the Scottish secure tenancy.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll revisit this in a comment. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. Sorry for my delay in finding the chat button. Most of my questions are answered in the paper, but just to tease out a wee bit more, in trying to market these properties, how far did we go in terms of Cooper Angus, nearby Strathmore or Greater Strathmore, or generally? Because we are in a wee bit of a conundrum. We've got a long list of folk wanting accommodation, and we've some accommodation that folk don't want. How wide was the marketing to prospective people who are maybe on the council list or on housing association lists?
Okay, I've got Claire coming in to answer that specific question.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson, and you'll see within the supplementary information within the appendix a wide range of activities that the service undertook in terms of promoting the properties. So that's on page 17 of the document, the committee document pack. We promoted the availability of the properties via social media platforms. It did generate some information, some interest. However, following several viewings, the properties were refused. Through our housing options approach, the properties were offered up to all applicants seeking accommodation in the Cooper Angus area and more widely. So we do market, when we have properties that are difficult to let like this, Councillor Wilson, we do market them more widely than just the applicants on the waiting list, or indeed households within the Cooper Angus area. We also offered a range of incentives, as you'll see from that overview there, such as white goods, financial assistance with removals, carpets, enhanced decoration. We developed a local lettings plan within the area, which we will often do if we have some challenges in particular areas in terms of letting properties. And we used the feedback from tenants who previously refused the properties to develop that local lettings initiative, and indeed to offer the incentives that I've just described. So despite all of these attempts that we made, you know, the interest in the buildings has been limited, and the refusals very much have been, as you'll see within section 1.4 of the report, the main reasons for the refusals are that the properties themselves internally are very dark, they're very small, they've got thick walls and small windows, and we're unable to do any work to the interior of the building. So these kind of issues that I've described there, due to the building's listed status, we're unable to do any further kind of enhancements to address these particular issues that are making them unattractive to prospective tenants. So although we did do the work, as we've recently discussed, to the exterior of the building, the reasons for refusal are those that I've just described. So the work to the exterior of the building has not overcome the issues and the reasons for refusal that I've just described.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I take it also, given it's B listing, we were unable to flatten it before we did any work to the exterior either. which has been a problem in other areas. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. Just a bit of clarity. I think Claire's actually pretty much answered my question as part of what she just said there, and the flats are currently in a state of readiness, so people could actually go in and stay in them now. Is that the case?
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Yes, that is correct. The properties are ready and available to let. The challenges that we've got, as I said, are finding suitable applicants for the properties. So, and then, you know, we're in a situation at the moment whereby we've obviously got repairing obligations to these properties, as you can see from the detail within the report. And as these properties are sitting empty, we are losing rent on them. So the financial impact to the housing revenue account, I think, is fairly clear or detailed within the report, and our wider tenants are having to fund that through their tenants' rents, the loss of revenue through the rent, and indeed any ongoing repairing obligations, which is why, as Elaine described, we're here today with the report.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councillor Lane, who's got comments and questions in there, but Councillor Lane, rest assured, given the size of this committee, there'll be plenty of time.
Thank you. It was just a comment on, and it kind of worries me that we as a social landlord seem to be saying we cannot make a go of this. We cannot make it financially viable, but a private landlord could, because of it seems to be offering a less of an offer. You know, there's no such secure flexibility in tenancy, numbers of people living in the building, etc. So if that's the way we go down, because obviously they'll not be able to do anything with the interior or exterior of the building. So, and they will still have the upkeep of the outside of it at 127,000, and it was said it's done every 2 years. I think we're going to lose control of this building. We've seen it in Perth and various other ones where it's sold privately, and then we then, our officers, enforcement officers, spend weeks and months chasing after somebody to do something with the building, and then ultimately it doesn't get done. I'd be worried about this happening in Cooper Angus, because I see no way forward for a private individual to give people a good tenancy and to make money out of this. And I think we'll lose control of the building. So is it really the question is really, are we saying that the only way that we'll manage to make this a financially viable proposition is to because of not so good conditions for the people who'd be letting the building? Because obviously the rent would maybe be higher than our rent. I don't understand the financial incentive for anybody to take this on and to upkeep the building as it should be when they can make no change to the interior or exterior of the building. How does it work? If somebody can explain to me how it works.
The conundrum then comes, Councillor Lane, is that we've already tried to market it to tenants without success, and we will be left with the cost, whichever way is really, I think, where your question's leading. But I would be happy for Claire to maybe answer that question just now.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lane, for the question. And I think, you know, as again, as we've described there, and when we've got that obligation in terms of best value, the financial costs to the housing revenue account of maintaining and keeping the building are fairly significant, and the proposal to reinvest the sums from sale of the building into affordable housing is absolutely key. In terms of your question regarding another landlord, I think there are some key points within there, and I think it will be interesting when we go out to market to see what the level of interest is. Any other potential purchaser would obviously have obligations to maintain the building. There are, however, within the private sector, a range of different sort of tenure options. You often find that people that are looking for kind of short-term interim accommodation will sort of you know, literally sort of moving in and out of properties on a very short-term basis for maybe sort of 2 or 3 months, up to 6 months, and the length of tenure tends to be significantly shorter. Our offer in terms of the social housing offer under our statutory obligations for a secure tenancy very much is that much longer tenancy that tends to be, you know, a property for life, or that could be available for life. Elaine, I don't know if you've got anything more to add in terms of the private sector offer and private sector landlords, but it does tend to be kind of shorter term tenancy agreements that people will sort of, you know, flit in and out of properties on a more sort of transient basis.
Probably nothing else to add, but just to say in terms of the financial for a private sector or an investor, is they've got much more opportunity to access grants and funding, unlike local authorities. So in terms of your concerns on the upkeep, meeting the requirements of Historical Scotland for the listed building status, there's a plethora of grants and whatnot available for private landlords in terms of meeting the requirements under the listed building status. So unlike local authorities, we've got limited opportunities to access these grants, but an investor or a private landlord has got a greater opportunity to access them.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor McCall and then Councillor Bailey. I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Convener, and sorry, Councillor Bailey, if I've come in front of you. It was based on the answers and the question just given there by Councillor Lane. As soon as we market this, we lose all control over what proposals come forward, is my understanding of this. Also, I might be entirely wrong, I thought a B-listed building was very much an exterior issue rather than an interior issue. So my understanding is that this is going to the open market, so it could be anybody that wants to invest in the property in any way, and they could legitimately change the inside of the building and keep the external. Am I wrong in my reading of the report that once we put this out to auction, it really is up to whoever wants to invest?
I will ask officers. I'm not sure if we have anyone from the planning team here because it's quite a specific question. I am aware that the burdens on a B-listed building are significantly higher than that of a C-listed building, but I'm not sure as to whether we're specific on the interior or not. Elaine, I see, is possibly coming with an answer.
In terms of your two questions, if a private landlord was to take that on, no, we don't lose control because they have to be registered as a private landlord, so it comes through. So there's an element of control there in terms of regulations, tenancy type, tenancy conditions. So no, we don't lose total control. In terms of listed building stated, it's not just the exterior, hence the reason we've already explored that in terms of trying to make the properties bigger, to make the windows bigger. So there is elements of the condition that do infect the internals of the building, not just the external.
Sorry, supplementary, if it's okay, Convener. As long as there's no visual impact on the external visual of the property. So sorry, I'm just trying to confirm, because again, we're looking at landlords, or your comment was on landlords, but if this was an investor who was willing to make it into 3 properties rather than that, there's a complete change in development. As soon as we go to the open market, it could be anyone that comes forward. Am I right in that assumption?
Yeah. Just before Elaine comes back in, what I will say, Councillor McCall, is that there are regulations relevant. One of the issues with this property is the size of the windows, and there are regulations regarding the floor space of a room, regarding the amount of light that's allowed into the room, and we wouldn't, in my view, be able to reconfigure the rooms to make 2 into 1 or something like that. I don't think that would potentially be a runner, but I would leave that to Elaine, who is much more knowledgeable than me.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly, we've looked at that in terms of making the property larger, because that is the main refusal reason, the size of the properties, and there's lots of restrictions in there, and given some of the restrictions, it's quite costly as well, and that's why we didn't progress it.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I've obviously asked my question backside foremost, but I've got the answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go back to Councillor Lane for another question. I see that Councillor Bailey wants to come in with a comment towards the end of questions. So
thank you again, convener. My question is regarding why we're going to auction and then we lose control of whoever bids for it, instead of going out as we often do for inviting people to come along, and then we have a preferred bidder status, and we at least then have some control over by seeing who the potential purchasers of the building are and form an opinion of what would be happening to this building. Again, I feel we are losing control of what happens to the building, because I know how difficult it is for our enforcement officers to enforce legislation, and we only have one, I think, or two now, and it's difficult, and we can see that. I'm sure every one of us has. So again, why straight to auction, and why not get a preferred bidder status? And the other question I'm going to throw in here, because I will be putting forward an amendment, is at the time with what's happening in Ukraine, and Perth and Kinross will obviously want to stand up and take the full share of refugees, etc., coming over and fleeing a war zone. I think it would be remiss of us as a local authority to dispose of this building at this time, where it could be suitable for people coming across from Ukraine. It's ready to go, as we've heard from officers. So
thank you. Just on your first point, Councillor Lane, I have experience of other buildings personally which the council have sold off, and generally I'm aware of one in Dunning where we discussed with a bidder for some time, and when we put it to auction, I think we got 2.7 times the offer that bidder or various bidders saw as their best offer, and I think that's one of the reasons it was go to auction, really around best value for the council. And I appreciate your points around control, and I would leave the rest of that to officers to respond to. Claire, I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Lane. So page 15 of the report, that was one of the questions that was raised at Housing and Communities Committee in terms of why auction was considered as the first option, and you'll see from the response there that selling, we took advice, obviously. I mean, obviously this report has been pulled together with hefty input from the estates team, who are obviously very familiar in this whole area, and obviously in terms of the advice and the approach to be taken. And selling at auction obviously obliges the purchaser to settle the sale within 28 days. A conventional sale operates on the ground of a conditional offer, which is where a potential purchaser offers a certain amount, but is then subject to them satisfying all of the conditions such as planning, structural surveys, ground condition. So just as Councillor Lyles described there, based on previous experience, conditional offers are a way for a party to offer a good purchase price, but then try and reduce them down. So based on the knowledge and experience of the open market and the fact that the building is listed, and indeed the ongoing financial impact that we have just discussed on the service, it was the opinion of our estates team and the advice of the estates team that the best option in terms of our legal obligations to reduce further delays and achieve the near market value for the building would be to go to auction in the first instance. So that was given careful consideration. I know that Elaine was heavily involved in the discussions with the estates team over that decision. Elaine, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that point.
No, Claire, I think you've covered it.
And I think again, Councillor.
No, you've gone on to mute, Claire.
Apologies about that. With regards to your second point in terms of supporting any Ukrainian refugees, or indeed more widely, you will be aware that the council has a very good, proactive, supportive and welcoming response, and I absolutely would assure you that that will continue to be the case. We actually, as you are aware, heavily utilise the private sector and work very, very closely with the private sector landlords in terms of any kind of response, and that would obviously continue to be the case. So I just would like to reassure you of that, and I would not anticipate any point that the decision that is made today will impact on the council's response in any way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Convener, can I just come back on supplementary? Thanks very much. I still didn't get the fact of losing control. I can see they want to do this quickly and a quick sale, etc. But part of my question was, again, no control over who this is building sold to if we go that way. If we go the other way through discussions and we can come back here with a preferred bidder status, I think, would you not agree that there's less control on who takes this building and what's purpose for if we put it to auction rather than if we go down the conventional route?
I think one of the things that's also a truism is that if you put it to auction and you still have the option at the fall of the hammer to accept the bid or not, and if you think it's someone who's unsatisfactory, and for some reason, I'm not sure, because whoever buys it has to fulfil all the obligations of a private landlord, and you know, the world is not perfect, Councillor Lane. I get what you're saying, but I'll maybe leave Elaine or Claire to come in with a more substantive answer.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle, and I think, yes, absolutely, I think that's correct at the point of sale, and also there will be a number of conditions attached to the sale. Elaine, have you got more detail any more detail to add to that response?
No, just to say what I've said before, if it's a private landlord who wants to take it on, there is the control there through our landlord registration. But apart from that, that's all the information I have. There's nobody here. We did invite people from the estates because they're the experts in this area. Unfortunately, they're not here today.
Andrew Thompson.
Yeah, so in terms of conditions and control in auction sale, you can add special conditions in your auction particulars. So up front, we could set certain conditions which we want to impose on the sale. But generally, once the hammer drops, that's it. You're in the contract for the sale, and within 28 days, you usually settle. So there is an opportunity to put conditions out there from the beginning, which the buyer would have to abide by.
I would assume, and there are a raft of conditions with the fact that it's a B-listed building. Anyway.
Yeah, so it depends on what conditions we'd wish to impose. There'll be, as it being a B-listed buildings, there's conditions there already by law. But as a council ourselves, we could look to impose further conditions if we wanted to. But again, you have to take into account if that's going to, for example, put off buyers. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think we've pretty well gone through the questions, and thank you everybody for their questions and comments. Councillor Bailey's comment is waiting till after the move the paper. I would like to move the paper as is just now, and ask for a seconder.
Happy to second, Convener.
Thank you. Do we have an amendment? Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much, Convener. Whilst I can understand the finances behind disposing of this property, I do not think that this is the correct time to do it. I think, as I've alluded to already about the Ukrainian crisis, and also I think we should remarket, not remarket, but encourage people to come forward and see if, again, before we dispose of this and lose pretty much a lot of control over who takes this on, because we're just putting out to auction, and we then have the costs of renovating this building every 2 years looks to be prohibitive. I don't know. I saw the state it was 3 years ago in these photographs when we were looking after the building, and it didn't look too good. So, and that's when it was in council ownership. So I just do not think this is the right time to do this. I think we should not one for dither and delay normally, but at this time I think we should be refocusing and trying to keep this building within our control. We don't have to look further than where I'm sitting, 2 High Street, and look up the street where a building ended up. We sell it on, it could be sold on again, and we have no control over who this building ends up with. So
Okay.
My motion is not to move, not to agree with the paper this time, and defer.
Yeah, I'm just, forgive me for summarising, I'm just, the points that you've made, Councillor Lane, was that you wish to move an amendment to retain the building in the council's ownership because, one, the Ukrainian crisis and the war, 2, the loss of control of the building, 3, the cost of renovation would be prohibitive to any prospective purchaser, and 4thly, it's the wrong time. Is that summarised?
That's much more succinct than I was, so thank you, convener.
Do we have a seconder? Okay, I don't see any seconder come forward. So,
I think
my apologies.
I'm happy to second. Sorry, convener, my pause button decided to do the hooky. My pause button was my.
I thought we'd lost.
Yeah, my mute button was doing. My mute button's been doing the hokey cokey on this, so sorry about that. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yep, thank you.
Good. It seems great.
You have seconded the amendment from Councillor Lane.
Yes, I think that I'm aware that there's a Ukrainian populace within Cooper Angus, and that they are obviously worried about their families back in Ukraine. And I do think that this building would provide some capacity for the council to do its great work that it does with refugees. And I think that this is the wrong time to do this now. Obviously, things have changed since the Housing Committee with the Ukrainian crisis. And I think that we should be looking to hold on to this property to have it as an asset for housing people from Ukraine, and obviously there'll be a local community as well for them to engage with at the same time, and I think that would be advantageous to explore all that before we make this final step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I take your points on board, but I would reaffirm that the council has an excellent record of how we accommodate the refugees that we have in our communities at the moment. Councillor Bailey, I'm minded to move to the vote and then take your comment as you indicated previously.
Sorry, forgive me, I was indicating that I was happy to have my comment at the appropriate time in the meeting. I think I put it in too early, but I would like to have a comment now that the amendments come forward. Okay, thank you. Carry on. Thank you, convener. Those people who know me will know that the amendment is probably closer to where my heart lies. I don't want to make this a great sort of political thing, but in the answers to my questions earlier, I was concerned actually that if we sell this, the new landlord has increased opportunities to offer flat shares. So to me, that reads a little bit like someone would find it easier to put more bodies into this building to their detriment. And the same with the limits on light and floor space. I'm actually quite happy that as a responsible social landlord, there are restrictions on the amount of light and floor space, as well as the number of people we can put into a building as a council. And I wouldn't want us to sell something to someone who can offer a lower standard of accommodation. So my worry as well is that someone takes this and sits on it and it ends up back on our hands anyway. I can't see that the private sector has magic wands that will allow them to do something with this building that we as a council can't do if we wanted to. And in the meantime, the property will certainly sit empty for many months. And as other councillors have pointed out, we might be in need of some accommodation at short notice in the coming months, but hopefully not. But that's my thoughts. Thank you. Happy for you to move to the vote, convener. No, thank you very much for your thoughts. I think the only comment I would have on what you said, Councillor Bailey, which is absolutely accurate, is that whoever takes on the building, the light and floor space regulations are the same, and it wouldn't be a case that a private landlord can reconfigure the rooms in a B-listed building, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I'm minded to move to the vote.
Convener, my apologies to interrupt. I formally second but didn't comment. I thought that I would be able to comment before the vote. Is it possible that I could make a comment as a formal second?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No. Charlotte, I would appreciate if we would move to a vote, please, and then we'll have comments thereafter. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just grab this sheet. Okay, so we have a motion by councillors Lyle and McCall to approve the paper for you today and proceed to auction the property. The amendment by councillors Lang and McEwen not to agree the report but to defer the decision to retain the building in council ownership for the reasons stated being the Ukrainian situation, retaining control in the council, the prohibitive costs for any new owner, and it being the wrong time to sell. If that's a fair summary, we'll proceed to the vote. If you could confirm you're voting for the motion or the amendment when I call your name, please. Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
That is the motion carried, 4 votes to 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Now, I'm aware that the difficulty that members have with this, given that we are at war, or we are potentially at war. Certainly Europe is at war, which is very concerning to all. And I'd like to thank you all for your heartfelt comments this morning, particularly supporting our Ukrainian friends. But Councillor McCall, you did ask for a comment, and I would like you to give you the opportunity to bring that in now.
Thank you, convener. It really wasn't to be much, because I actually agree with some of the issues and the amendment. But I just wanted to comment that our own tenants are stating that this property and these forms of accommodation are not suitable for them. There's minimal light, there's minimal space, and the size of the windows is causing a natural light issue. I would like to think that all our tenants, whether they come from a war-torn area, whether they are living here for whatever their reasons, that they have a perfect standard of accommodation when they come to live in Perth and Kinross, or if they live in Perth and Kinross. And if our tenants are actually saying that these properties that we're offering are substandard, then as a council, I think we really should be looking to make sure that our standard is as high as possible. And that was the only comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Our tenants did not state that as the first point. That was tenants that are already in other accommodation. I feel that today, I agree totally that all tenants and everybody should be able to live in suitable accommodation, but by agreeing to pass this to auction, we've heard that one of the reasons will be that they'll be able to flat share in there, and that become, as Councillor Bailey put, more bodies, he said, but it's more human beings living in that space that wasn't found, that we could have had control on. We don't seem to, will not have the same control because of the flexibility that was stated by officers that private landlords have over the number of people living in the accommodation. So that's my concern, that's what we've done today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings the meeting to a close. So I'd like to thank you all for your time, for your questions, and for your contributions this morning. And I hope you have a successful rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.